Okay, so in this video, we're going to look at some applications of slope and different types of questions with slope and how to solve different things based on different kinds of information. So here we got some questions where it says, we got a couple points. We got 0.28 and we point x minus 4, and they make a line with a slope of 4. And what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and find out what the missing values are. So those 2 points will give a slope of 4. So this is where that one notation where, rides over runs okay, but this is where that notation of y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 will give you the slope can really come in handy and work really, really well. So this is the notation that we'd want to use for something like this. Okay, so I'm actually going to just move this over to their side and give us a little more room. Now again, I'm going to label my points. This can be x1, y1, this be x2, y2. So x2 is what I'm actually going to be looking for, and we'll see when we piece this together. So if I would write this out, I would have a slope of 4, because I know my slope is 4, that's my m value, is equal to minus 4 take away 8 over x, which is what I'm looking for, minus 2. So I have this. And now I just have to try and solve for my x value, and this is where some basic algebra and stuff like that kicks in. So if I do that, I've got my 4 over here. I'm just going to write my 4. Negative 4 take away 8 is minus 12, and that is x minus 2. And this is where some cross-multiplying kicks in order to solve for something like this. So of course, cross-multiplying, 4 times x minus 2 has to be equal to minus 12 times 1, because of course there's like an invisible little over 1 right there. So this has to be equal to this. That's just basic cross multiplying from like grade 9 and stuff like that. So if I do my cross multiplying, 4 times x minus 2 has to be equal to 1 times negative 12, so that's negative 12. So now I can solve for x. So I have to multiply through the brackets. That'll be 4x minus 8 is equal to negative 12. Add 8 to both sides, so it'll be 4x is equal to minus 4. And then I will divide by 4 on both sides, so the 4's would cancel out here. Divide by 4 over there, and x would then be equal to minus 1. So my coordinate right here, that value right there, that is minus 1. Okay, so now I'm going to try the second one over here. So once again, I'm just going to write out my expression, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That's for my slope. And this has to give me negative 2 over 7. So same thing, I'm going to substitute some values in here and then work with that. Okay. So if I put in my y2 is negative 4, take away y1, which is the y, which I don't know. And then I've got my x2 is 2, and that's minus a negative 5. Okay, so of course down here, this right here, 2 minus negative 5, that is just going to give me 7 down there. All right, so now I'm going to cross multiply. So if I cross multiply, I'm going to do the negative 2 times this, which is just 7. So negative 2 times 7 is, of course, negative 14. And that has to be equal to this times this. So 7 times negative 4 take away y. Okay, so if we do that, negative 14 is going to be equal to, that times that is negative 28. Times that is negative 7y, and then I'll add 28 to both sides, so this becomes 14, and I have negative 7y. I'm running out of room here, and then I divide by negative 7 both sides, so 14 divided by negative 7, y would have a value of minus 2. Okay, so there's the first two all sort of laid out. It's kind of not a lot of room in here to write on this thing, but we do what we can. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to try the next two, number 3 and number 4. So maybe pause the video and try them yourself, and then unpause it and see if your solutions sort of match up to my solutions. because I'm going to work on them while the thing is paused, and then when I replay and start recording again, the two solutions should be up. Okay, so here's the next two solutions. Hopefully they match up to yours. 8 minus y over 6 minus 4 equals 17 over 2. This, of course, equal to 2. I cross-multiplied them to get this, multiplied out the brackets to get this, and then simplified and got y is equal to minus 9. And over here, same type of thing. The numerator here was equal to minus 7. And this was over an invisible 1, so if you want to put the invisible 1, that's fine. So then negative 7 times 1, of course negative 7, is equal to the minus 7 multiplied to 3 minus x, multiplied with the brackets, and solved, and get the x minus 7. So hopefully those matched up close to your answers, or the same as your answers actually, and if not, then hopefully you can see where there might be some slight changes. Now, the thing is, when you get your final answer, you can always take this and put this back into here. You can put the 7 in here and then do the rise over run calculation, or the delta y over delta x calculation, and see if the slope matches up, because it should be the same. So it's easy to check your answers. Okay, so maybe pause it again. I'm going to do the next two questions and see how those go. It's interesting because they're both a slope of 0, so they're flat. So we'll see how this goes. Now these ones are actually quite a bit quicker. For number 5, you should go to y equals 1, and this one y equals 8. Now the trick, so to speak, is that whole slope is equal to 0 thing. If the slope is equal to 0, that means it has to be flat, which means the y value cannot change. So the y value here and the y value here has to be the same. So you should just know it's just going to be 1. Same thing here, the y value is 8. It can't change with a slope of 0, therefore this y value has to be 8. The x values are actually irrelevant. The other way you can look at it is if you do set up the expression, if this has to be equal to 0, the top or numerator has to be equal to 0. Well, what take away 1 gives you 0? Well, that has to be 1 in order for that to be 0. The same thing here. This would have to be a value of 8 in order to give you 0. So there's a couple ways you can look at it, but when slope is equal to 0, it actually makes this type of question an awful lot easier. Okay, for the next type of question, it says the slopes of a pair of parallel lines are given below. Find the value of k. So this is the slope for one line, and this is the slope from the second line. And if they're parallel, that means that the slopes are equal to each other. So this slope and this slope have to be equal to each other. That's why they're parallel. Well, that means that this k plus 2 and the 7 must be equal to each other. So k plus 2 has to be equal to 7. So the slope of the first line has to be equal to the slope of the second line. Well, then it's just basic operations. If k plus 2 has to be equal to 7, well then k has to have a value of 5. So that would be the value for that one. Okay, same type of thing for this one here. This slope has to be equal to this slope, so let's just make them equal to each other. So 2k minus 1 has to be equal to 13. So order of operations and reverse everything. We'll add 1 to both sides. That becomes 2k. That becomes 14. We'll divide by 2 on both sides, and k is 7. Okay, so I'm going to pause a little bit, try the last one on your own, and then we'll get back to it. Okay, so for the last one, hopefully you got k is equal to 13 over 4. I just left as an improper fraction. So the 2k minus 6 has to be equal to 1/2. I got rid of the fraction. I just multiplied by 2 all the way across. So multiplied everything by 2 to make it 4k minus 12 equals 1. And then I find that a lot easier to work with than using fractions. And then I just solved for the k value and got 13 over 4. Okay, all right. So now the next part we have is using the slopes of a pair of perpendicular lines are given below. Find the value of k. So very similar, except perpendicular slopes instead of parallel slopes. So this is similar, except I know that the slopes are perpendicular to each other. It's not equal to each other, but one is equal to the negative inverse of the other one. So if I have to take one of them and I have to flip one of them and make them negative, I think the 6 is easier to flip and make negative than this one over here. So I'm going to flip the slope and make it negative, and then that one should be equal to the k plus 5 over 2, and the two slopes should be perpendicular over here, but now they should be the same. So remember, slopes of perpendicular lines One is the inverse or flipped, and you make it negative. So I flipped my 6 and made it negative, and now the two should be equal to each other. So now we do the same type thing we did before. I am going to cross multiply in order to find out my k value. So if I cross multiply, negative 1 times 2 is minus 2. And then I've got 6 times k plus 5. So this is minus 2 is equal to 6k plus 30. I'll subtract 30 from both sides. So this becomes negative 32 is equal to 6k. And then divide by 6 on both sides. So this would be negative 32 over 6 is equal to k. And of course, we could reduce that a little bit. We can cut them both in half, so that could be minus 16 over 3 is equal to k, and then you could change it to an improper fraction if you want. Okay, so pause it again. We'll do the next two, and then hopefully your answers will match these ones. Okay, so hopefully for B and C, hopefully you got a k value of negative 2/3 and a k value of negative 3/4. Again, here I took the fraction, I flipped the fraction and made it negative. It doesn't actually matter which one you flip and change the sign of. It should have worked no matter what. But I flipped the 4 over 3, made it negative, cross multiplied the 2, which gave me 6k is equal to minus 4, and then I divided by 6 on both sides and reduced it and got negative 2/3. Here I flipped this fraction one, so I flipped it, made it negative, which gave me this. I multiplied the negative k by the invisible 1, giving me negative k over here. This times this will give you 3k plus 3, that's over there. And then I end up with this. I subtracted 3k from both sides, which got rid of it here and made this minus 4k. That's equal to 3. And then just divide by negative 4 on both sides, and your k value ends up being negative 3/4. Okay, so hopefully those worked out good, and you got the same type of answers that I did.